You can now die in BubbleGoBoom, but there isn't really much of a point of living because there isn't a save system yet. Matter of fact, there's only really 3 things you can use. A clutch would be a stretch because I haven't made an inventory system yet. A gun which is glued to your hand, a bar of soap, and some baby oil. So let's fix that, so that there's actually a point to your run besides this arbitrarily useless score. I started by creating a class called lootable item, which will define the basics of every item that we're going to store, described by its name, an idle animation, which I haven't made yet, sprites, so you can actually see it, and particles, which will be made whenever you pick it up, because, well, doesn't that look good? And I can do that without Unity's particle system. Wonderful invention made by the creators. Wait, what about weapons? Surely it would be boring if you could only shoot your enemies, right? Probably, so just in case I decide to torture myself in making a melee system in the future, I made a weapon class, which will inherit all the basics of the lootable item class I've got. From now onwards, I can add all the extra weapon specific stuff like durability and item damage, etc. because I can't be having you using busted items forever, can I? But you'll never get the good loot by killing the enemies though. Come on! This is a child-friendly game. I don't want to be encouraging first-degree murder. However, there are chests. Taking those shiny items which aren't yours might be a good idea. But this is all pretty useless if you can't access whatever you've picked up, so I made a drag and drop system to move stuff within the player's inventory and the chests you find while I go around the level. Surely this should be pretty easy to make, right? I mean, it's just dragging and drop. Sure. Basically, I made another class to represent each slot in my inventory so that each slot actually knows what's supposed to be inside of it. However, to make sure that all of the player inventory slots know that their contents are supposed to update whatever the player has, and likewise for the chest, they're going to need references to their appropriate scripts. For the player, inventory bar. In theory, this meant that dragging and dropping between slots of the same inventory type was super easy, like for example dragging within this player bar, or dragging through the chests up here. Ignore the fact that my chest didn't even want to do that initially. However, if you wanted to store your good loot in chests or take it out, because well, you're only getting 4 inventory slots as a player, that wasn't happening because you were trying to share items between classes which want nothing to do with each other. That is until I give them something in common, an interface. At this point now, we've got the player inventory and the chest inventory containers are forced to share some of the functions, so that my drag and drop script knows, oh hey, you're both containers. We can put stuff in between you and do stuff. But wait, why isn't it working? I just had to swap these 2 lines in this function so that my code doesn't throw a hissy fit if I'm dragging an item into an empty slot. Bruh. As a result, we can now do this. Hey! Realistically, there's probably a more efficient way of doing this, like for example, inheritance. But hey, I can fix that later after all the basics are working. Do you really care that I'm basically copying 90% of the same functions but changing 2 variables at a time? Probably not, and I didn't think so. Not my problem. However, I didn't neglect optimization properly because, well, what kind of programmer would I be then? So that I'm not banging my head later on down the road, I decided that I can't be bothered to generate the contents of each chest up until when you've actually opened them. Because, well, we don't really care what's inside the box until we open it. Why calculate what's in 50 chests if you've only ever opened 10? Cool, but there's no save file. If you have to hop off the game for whatever reason, be it your mum calling you for dinner or whatever else, you'd lose all your progress. So, how are we going to save it? I'm going to use Unity's inbuilt serialization library, JSON utility, to convenience for That was so much easier than I thought. Wait a second. What's this? Thankfully, some legends created another serialization library called NewtonSoft.json, which actually serializes the values of my specified objects, which would fix my problem. That is, if it decided to store my private and protected variables as well, instead of just the public ones. TLDR for anyone who can't be bothered to learn computer science because, well, the job market is cooked. Private variables are like your introverts. You can never find them outside of their house/class without getting an extrovert to get them outside. Right now, my serializer is only taking note of my extroverted public variables, so now, if I want to save everything, we're going to need to break into the houses of our private and protected variables to get what we want. I could also just make my life easier and just make all the variables to be stored public, but That's going to make your life as a modder way too easy, and I'm not ready for cheats yet, because I can't be bothered to patch that, so no, I'm the one publishing the mods here, not you. Unknowingly, this serializer change meant that I had to rewrite how I'm even storing the information of my rooms, my enemies, and my chests. Before, I could just tack on some simple descriptive variables to a script and call it a day. But because this Newton thing isn't technically a Unity thing, it really hates the Unity specific mono behavior interface, so, but in my new method, I've decided to, well, put a little secret in the save file, which you may or may not notice. Besides, you don't actually have to look inside the save file to see it. You should notice it well enough if you ever decide to save your game and come back by telling you, have fun finding that out. And with all of that, I should have a basic save system working, if I could be bothered to serialize properly my lootable items, which inherit from yet another Unity specific class, which Newton hates. But that's a problem for another day because I can't be bothered to right now. In the midst of all this, I noticed that there were so many other things which were just so wrong. Like, for starters, I have a time script. What is it doing? And on top of that, even how it's written is just horrible. Like, each of the functions inside only have one line, so why am I even using curly braces? And wait, hold on, wait a second. Which objects are you even using this script? I also decided that let's use Unity's new input system again, despite my previous beef with it, because it's actually not that bad once you rewrite half of your code. So I've added that back into my script and I'm finally getting the hang of it, despite accidentally deleting and rewriting the camera tracking movement that I already had in my player movement script. I also noticed that the health bar is low-key kinda ugly. I don't like that. Let's hope it's that if you ever to gain or lose health, that we're gonna have a nice smooth transition in the boss value. Ignore the fact that there's currently a major security breach in all the games published by the Unity editor version that I'm currently using to make BubbleGoBoom, because, well, that's a problem for another day when I actually build the demo. Until then, I do not care. And that's pretty much what I've been up to so far in terms of actually writing the code. I also spent some time trying to brainstorm a story to make this thing properly fleshed out, which is awesome. Yeah, if you're curious, you want to message me, questions, whatever, maybe just weekly updates, which I should be doing. Those will be on Smash, my Instagram handle, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.